Hi, everyone. Welcome to the San Diego Mountain Biking Association first sort of podcast presentation. We're really excited to be here. I am Susie Murphy, the Executive Director of the San Diego Mountain Biking Association. And with me today is Matt Bartelt, who is our Vice President of our board and also our longtime liaison to Penasquitos and Black Mountain. And we wanted to get together to share some stories with you. And so we hope this will be the first in several presentations like this so we can talk about what we do. And we're going to do the first part today, a presentation about the trail development at Black Mountain Open Space Park in the Rancho Bernardo area. And so let's get started. So, hi, Matt.
Hi, Susie.
So, let's start with the beginning. Um, Black Mountain Open Space Park is located up in Rancho Bernardo, right off the 15. It's got the big antennas on the top. A lot of people pass it every day. Matt, how long have you lived in that area?
The immediate area here, I've lived right underneath the mountain since 2010. I live just adjacent to it in Mira Mesa since 1992. So I've been here for a while.
All right. And so when you moved close to the mountain there, and you, I assume, probably started exploring and looking up at that mountain and wondering what was up there. Uh, what made you get involved in kind of thinking about trail design or trail building or helping the effort?
Oh, I don't think anybody gets into this on purpose. It's kind of by accident. It all started for me way back in probably 2006. Just riding on the Del Mar Mesa, got to know the tunnel trails really well. And then about that time is when they became under threat and were trying to close them down. So I fell into advocacy pretty much by accident. And that little bit of advocacy led to trail building and other events. And through the course of all that, I was introduced to various people, including Rod Simmons and Gardner Grady, both who were very active with the San Diego Mountain Biking Association.
Awesome. And so when you were in the neighborhood and starting to explore the area and the mountain, what was Black Mountain like before there was any of the trail improvements that we know of now? Like, what was it like? What were people doing up on the mountain? Any history there, or to kind of give people an idea of what it was like before?
When I first really started looking at this, it was the early days of riding mountain bikes, and honestly, it was back as early as probably 98. My one friend would take me out that direction after a long ride through Penasquitos, and the trails there were pretty much known to be either straight up or straight down. The bunch series of service roads, jeep trails, motorcycle paths. There really wasn't a lot of continuity to it. It was just it was a mess.
And so at that point, did the open space exist as a real open space managed by the city, or was it what was the land management situation at that time?
Oh gosh, there was it was open space, but there was not as much land at the time. There was a bunch of parcels of private land that were kind of strewn together. Over time, the Park Service has built out by purchasing the various lands and bringing them all together. So what you see today is far different just from a land management process or land management ownership than what it was at that time. It was a mess.
And I'm sure many people that have explored around Black Mountain come across the glider port parking area. Can you explain why it's called glider port?
Oh, that's over on the roughly northwest side. Gliderport was actually where some of the first glider planes were tested. It's used now. You probably have seen if you've driven around Black Mountain. There would be the parasailers. In the earlier days, we had the hang gliders that were launched off of the mountain. But also at the same time, if you ever are standing at the glider port parking lot, just looking up the mountain, you can see the remnants of the scarring from all of the off-road activity. They used to use that one portion of the hill as a test to see how far they could get their Jeeps or off-road vehicles up, and it was substantially scarred and damaged in that time.
Well, that sounds interesting.
Yep.
Anyway, yeah, a little different today. Um, so, how would you describe the trails at Black Mountain before any improvement was done that Stimba got involved with, or anything as far as early mountain bikers were concerned? What was the character of the trails or the roads, or how would you
Right.
describe them?
One of my earliest loops that I had discovered out there was starting over on the north loop, and basically it was going straight up the mountain across the east ridge. There's a old service road that runs the whole length of the east ridge over to Black Mountain and then back and around through Miners Ridge Loop. Now, Miners Ridge has been there for a while, but that was probably the closest to any established single track that was out there. Again, everything else was service roads. It honestly was hike a bike where to get up a mountain, if you didn't take the service road, you probably had the bike over your shoulder. I remember scrambling up those slopes enough times. And then the descents weren't much more much more of a trail beyond a pure fall line in many areas. So it was not somewhere where most riders would go and ride their mountain bikes. In fact, it was very rarely, if ever, used for that.
Right. Okay. And so, how did Stimba first become involved in the area? Like, what year or who was involved? What happened?
There's been a couple different liaisons that have served out there. The first one that I know of was Dave Wink, and that was probably back in the early 2000s. He served out there for a number of years, worked with the different rangers that came through, and then it fell on to Rod Simmons. He was a former president for SDMBA, and he served on the board there for a number of years, probably up until 2016, 17, maybe even later than that. And then ultimately I took over there. But it was Dave and Rod that probably were the visionary people who got a lot of what you know and see out there started. So it was we owe them quite a bit of thanks.
Okay. And what would you say would have happened at Black Mountain if a group like Stimba hadn't have been around? Stimba was formed in 1994, so this is an early effort to do a really comprehensive sort of advocacy project. What do you think Black Mountain would have been like if Stimba hadn't gotten involved so early?
Oh, well, the amount of effort that it took us to help get the trails plan formatted was a lot. And so it would have been interesting to see. I'm glad we got involved, but if we weren't there, I would have hoped that somebody else would have done something similar. But nobody knows. Again, it's one of those things that not many people were using it. It was used, but compared to where it is now with the trails, it would have been a far cry, I would think, from what we see today. Would there be other trails? Yeah, maybe, but would they have the connectivity or it's so hard to guess on something like that. I would like to believe that somebody would step up and do that, but I'm happy that we did.
But I guess, as uh, being with Stimba and understanding what we do, I guess when mountain bikers think of looking at an area like this, we're all about the trail experience and the connectivity and the loops that can be done and how uh, it makes an interesting ride around such a big mountain. And so I'd like to think that it's probably better connected or better planned out than it might have been with nobody picking up the slack. So thank you for that.
Thank you. I would agree with that. I do love the fact that it was a large group of people that did this. It wasn't just one or two people. But yes, thank you.
Mhm, mhm. Um, and I know that a lot of the progress here has been because we have a great relationship with the land managers, um, the rangers that work at Black Mountain. with the city of San Diego. So can you explain a little bit about that partnership with the Rangers there?
Sure. It's interesting. It's so much, you know, people want to believe that you show up and you're going to make a trail, and so much has gone into it to get to that point. There were years of planning. It's understanding. It's taking a real interest in what is going on, not only at the mountain but the community and at the city, because there's so many dynamic forces that come together that you have to align in order for this to happen. So one of the things that just, we were involved in different ways, working with the ranger. The ranger there is Senior Ranger Ed Christensen. He's been phenomenal and works very well with us. But working with him to build that trust in the early days was things like doing projects that may not be necessarily bike specific. It might be just for the betterment of the park, assisting, kind of being eyes on the ground, letting them know if there were problems. For example, if there was, I don't know, broken gate or vandalism, something along those lines. And over time, that trust is built up. And what happened, we were really lucky to have Ed because he had a lot of vision and started helping us plan for trails future. He always wanted to have more trails on the mountain. So there's the trust issue that's out there. There certainly was a little bit of good fortune that we had a ranger who had some vision, who really wanted to build out the trails, and that's what it is. It's building that relationship, making sure they understand you're not just I have to have trail at all costs, nothing else there. Being an advocate and supporting their mission has been really crucial to getting some of the help that we've been able to get from him.
Awesome. Uh, and so we have a slide up on the screen here that is a map of on the Black Mountain area and a little timeline with the trails that STEMBA has helped develop on the mountain. So everybody can kind of see the progression there. We'll talk in a minute about some details about the early trails, Awi and Lilac, that were kind of the first ones. But besides working with Ranger Ed and the land managers and the city and everything, what other considerations do you have to take into account when proposing a trail project? Like, are there other stakeholders and the other trail users and maybe like community planning groups that you have to get involved with? How does that work?
It's interesting because you can look at a map like what's here and you see the park represented. But what you don't see is the actual parcel ownership inside of there. And it is not uncommon for a single trail to traverse 5 to 8 different property types. In this map, what you don't see is San Diego Water Department, county land, city land. But also you have to take into account private property, state-owned land, federal-owned land. So you have a whole list of not just these properties that you have to address, but each property may have its own set of requirements that have to be met to be able to cross them. So it's those things. Now, once you start getting this lined up, think of the bureaucratic maze that you have to go through. You have to talk to city development, parks and rec. You have to address neighbors. You have to talk to special interest groups like the Friends of Penasquitos or anybody who may have a vested interest because you really want that buy-in. The last thing you want to do is create enemies. It is, for the betterment of everybody. So it can be a lengthy process in getting those ducks in a row before that shovel hits the ground. And in all honesty, it's not the shovel work, the trail building that's the hard part. It's dealing with all of the groups and the bureaucracy and the requirements to get to that shovel-ready project. That's where the real work and time seems to take place.
Absolutely. So the timeline in the map here, you can see that the master plan was starting to be talked about in 2008 and wasn't formally adopted and approved until 2014. And I find it very impressive that that winter season of 2014-15, you guys rallied some pretty big trail work days out on Lilac to start, which is the red line. here on the map. And then the next season uh, worked on Awi as well, that connects Black Mountain Community Park, where a lot of people stage to ride the mountain these days. Also, the site of our famous aid station number 3 for the archipelago ride. So it connects Black Mountain Community Park all the way up to Miners Ridge parking. Tell us about some of those early trail work days. I know there were some pretty big ones. What was the community reaction to just getting that little connector built, which was so important to keep people off of the road, right?
Yeah. It made it a lot more fun and safe for everybody. But it was interesting. Was able to organize that first day, and that was probably December of 2014. And I've gone through other build days where I've done the work and worked for people, but I've never led a project before. So using social media, meetup.com, Facebook, some of the other sites that I knew, was able to get a lot of interest in those. And the first couple builds were between 20 and 30 people. So we set up camp in the Miners Ridge parking lot and start laying out all the tools. I had picked them up earlier. Like, okay, this is easy. But then all of a sudden I realized everybody's looking to me for guidance on what to do. And it dawned on me real quick. It's like, oh, I'm in charge of this. So I had to borrow speeches from other people that I've heard. Gardner, he was a fantastic trail boss, had a great story about the circle of death, which was just the danger zone with the tools. So I borrowed that. And it was really trial and fortunately not a lot of error, but some error. We went back and fixed that. I was lucky. We had a large group of people who've done other trail work, so everybody was well in the know. But it was a large learning curve for everybody because going through and cutting those initial benches into the Lilac Trail, we ran across a lot of manzanita that we had to move and discovered pulling manzanita from the surface isn't so hard, but we discovered root balls were in the neighborhood of 80 to 100 pounds. And we pulled out some large pieces of wood. And you just can't leave that in the trail because as it deteriorates over time, that trail would collapse, or worse yet, it grows back, and now you have a tree in the middle of your trail. So we got out there and we started from the east heading west, got about two-thirds of the way, and then ultimately had to come in from the glider point trail, which was where the other side of the trail was, and come into the direction. And we had different people. Rich Julian, a lot of you may know who he is, was really instrumental in getting that last part connected because he was climbing through the bushes in his hands and knees. He was known as the man on the mountain for many weeks because he was out there day after day. But once that was all connected, that was a great little piece to have done. And then our crowning jewel to close all that out, the Ollie Trail, which connects from basically the Glider Point Trail underneath Carmel Valley Bridge and around to the Black Mountain Ball Fields. That trail took a little bit of planning, but the actual build itself, we were able to draw over 120 people out on that day. We had tools coming from everywhere. We had traffic control, car parking. It was crazy. But in that day, we built a 3/4 mile single track trail complete. And that's something that we hadn't done before. So it was a lot of fun to bring in not just bike riders. We had scouts, we had hiking groups, we had high school interest groups, we had community members from all over the place. So what happened is as this project progressed, while it only took one season, it went from busy to a full-blown project management. So my feet got wet really quick and got a lot more comfortable managing the people and became less of a worker than the director out there on the field. But it was a lot of fun because then you learned to subdivide groups, how to manage. You don't want large groups, you want smaller groups, and just making sure, walking the line, making sure things are done. Because remember that we're building a trail, but it's been approved and blessed by the city. And the ranger has expectations. So it was my job to make sure that those expectations were met, if not exceeded. So it kept us all busy. But I'll tell you what, after that first year, we got press coverage. We were interviewed by city officials, including elected officials as well as management officials. Um, that trail saw a lot of use, and we were actually able to finish it in time and incorporate it into the archipelago ride that year. And it was well received. So it was something we're really proud of.
Right. Well, it is a really fun trail to ride either direction, in my opinion. It's beautifully made. It's required not a whole lot of maintenance because it was designed well in the first place. There's a couple spots we've had to keep an eye on. And Matt, you just replaced the little bridge across the culvert this past, late in 2019, replaced that little bridge there. So thanks for that as well.
Oh, sure.
Um, so in subsequent talks, presentations we'll do like this, we're going to talk about the development of the other trails on this map. So we'll forgo that for now. We have a few pictures here of some of the work days. Here's some pictures of that big day on Awi that Matt was speaking of. And you can see we got some kids out there, dads and kids, moms and kids, and people. And to have such a successful large day that's safe for everyone and very productive just speaks to the layers and layers of planning and really good implementation for a day like this. That was a good one, epic day. And then here's a few more recent pictures of some of the crews that were working up, I think, on Manzanita. Uh, and we're fortunate also to be able to help the land managers with other projects that are trail enhancements, suggesting and helping on signage, and then also with the tool station. This is actually a picture of Matt and his son installing the one down. Can you explain where that tool station is, Matt? The
Sure.
second one? Uh-huh.
The picture all the way on the far right, that tool station is down in Lusardi Canyon. It is more or less directly below the Caminaville Sur Bridge. And that was put there in part because that was part of the archipelago ride. And we have a lot of riders there, relatively remote. So my youngest son there, Camden, and I dug out that hole, drove it in, put the concrete in, and had that one mounted.
And then the picture in the middle is Matt and his daughter and somebody else there, but that's the first station we installed, which is up at the intersection of Nighthawk and Little Black, kind of right in the saddle there, which is a really handy spot. These tool stations were made possible by a grant from REI, and they've been really well received, and people have really seemed to appreciate them. So uh, these pictures, as we get into our next episode, we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the other trail development and how SDMBA has increased our capacity to work. And there's a couple pictures here of pieces of equipment, motorized wheelbarrow and toolboxes and the mini excavator that help us get even more work done. So we'll cover some of that. And then as a little teaser, we have a little video here of some drone footage of building on Black Widow. So I'll go ahead and play this. I think, Matt, was this in 2019 or 2018 maybe?
This was 2018. This was the first year. As a matter of fact, there's the excavator right there on the trail. So this is when we were first cutting the trail and getting ready to put the first of the pavered berms in.
Right, so you can kind of get an idea of the scale here of Black Widow, and we'll talk more about Black Widow and how it came about and what is happening nowadays with future trail development in Black Mountain. So, Matt, I just want to thank you for all your work and helping SDMBA grow so much. And I hope that this was helpful for people in understanding what San Diego Mountain Biking Association does. And Matt, you have any final words?
No, just want to thank you for doing this for us, Susie.
Okay. And so this is part one, and we'll come back with part two on Black Mountain Trail development soon. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.